what is the result of the invocation of post increment. What is it? Oh, I forgot one line. I forgot to trace line 6. Okay, sorry about that. So that will be line 6. This will be line 7. Okay, line 6 is the important line. I forgot to trace that. Now, do you guys know how I realized I forgot to trace it? Because it's still a question mark by the time I got back to line 11, so I realized, oh, I forgot something. Okay, so we're now on line 7 of the trace. Okay, let's. Line 6. Seriously, line 6. You're right. So we're now on line.
You keep trying to skip line 6. You don't like it or something.
6 is not a lucky number. So we're now on line 6, and we're trying to return a value. What are we returning? On line 6, we are returning the value of local variable y. Local variable y has a value of 5. In other words, on line 6, we are returning a value of 5. So that means what we do is we go to the return info cell, we copy and paste it, and then we change the question mark to a value of 5, because that's exactly the value of y at this point. Okay. Then we move on to line 7. Line 7 is the end of the subroutine. We deallocate the 3 columns. And then according to return info, we go back to line 11. But line 11 now looks like this. And as a result, we are just printing a value of 5. Then we move on to line 12. Line 12 is not really that suspicious. All it is doing is printing out the value of j at this point. What is it going to print? It's going to print 6 because j as a local variable has a value of 6. In fact, it has had a value of 6 since row 9 of the trace. Then we move on to line 13. Line 13 is the end of the main subroutine. So what we do is we deallocate these 2 columns and return to post, and that concludes the entire trace. So it doesn't look like it's very useful at this point. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of points of doing a post increment, making a post increment subroutine. But when you move on to a C class or C++ or Java or Perl or Python or PHP class, they will use the post increment operator quite often. Depending on where the post increment operator appears, sometimes it can be confusing. What is it actually doing? Is it adding a number first, and then what is it returning? Is it returning the number after it is incremented, or is it returning the value before the increment? So this explains the post increment in pseudocode. When you move on to cisp300, you can refer back to this trace here to understand exactly what post increment is doing. Are there any questions about this trace? No. Now here's an interesting case too, because most of the time we have subroutines that will either use a by reference parameter to return a value, or it would use a return statement to return a value. In this case, we have both. Okay? The subroutine changes the parameter as well as return a value. Yep, go ahead.
How come it's print 5 instead of print 6?
Because it is specified here. Because row 10 of the trace or line 6 of the trace specifies a return statement. But the return statement is using y to return, and y at that time had a value of 5. And that's why it's returning 5 and not returning 6. Now, local variable j has been updated to 6 already by the time we return 5. But we are not returning x, we are returning y, and that's why it is going to print 5, because we are returning the value of j before it got changed.
I thought it was printing j instead of printing.
That's exactly why it is confusing. It has to do with I took a snapshot of y, that's because I took a snapshot of x before I incremented, and then I returned the value I returned the old value before it got incremented, and that's why it's printing out 5 initially, and then on line 6, when I'm printing j itself, then it prints exactly 6. Okay. Any other questions? That's a good question, because you will have that question again in cisp360, especially if I don't talk about this today. Any other questions about the post increment operator? Now in C++, you won't see an invocation to a subroutine called post increment. Instead, this line will be line 11, will look like print J++. Okay, that's what the post increment operator looks like in C++. And that's also partially why C++ has its name C++. It's the name C and then with a post increment operator. Okay.
How common is C++? I mean, because there's BASIC came out with some great stuff, Python. You see, right now there's some great new programs that are really taking over the market. But in my major, I'm an astrophysics major. They're requiring we take C++. Am I actually going to use C++ as a programming choice, or?
Okay, now that's a good question, and I think I can explain the why you're learning C++. Okay, even though you may or may not be using C++. Okay, first of all, you have to look up the C programming language, the roots and the history of the C programming language. So we'll go ahead and take a little detour at this point, and we can just go to Google and look for history of the C language. And the first few are from Bell Labs, because it is a programming language developed by the Bell Lab. And by the way, you guys should read this one because I use it a lot in the class, and I suspect some of you use it also on your own for personal stuff. It's basically just asking you to donate money, for Wikipedia, and I did, because I use Wikipedia to replace many books. When I myself have to learn to do something, I just go to Wikipedia or go to Google. So to me, it is worth the price of at least 5 or 6 books already. I did not make a pledge of that much. I mean, that's a lot of money. Okay, so when you look at C, you can go to the history. And I can just kind of talk about the early development at this point, because I just need to talk about the nature of the C programming language. If I don't want to read all this text here and explain all the hyperlinks along the way, I only have to say one thing. C was a programming language developed by hackers for hackers. Now, when I say hackers in this case, it is not a bad, a black hat, someone who wants to break into other people's computer. I'm talking about really seasoned computer programmers. Okay, one of these, or the original, programmers that can program everything in assembly programming language. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. So as a result, C was not really a very suitable language as a instructional programming language. Okay, if you want to learn programming, you should not be starting with C. Okay, that's the bottom line. So the question now is, why are we learning C as the beginning programming language? Can anyone kind of explain why?
Well,
Yep.
From the language that I've worked on, a lot of them are built around C.
Java is based on C.
Yeah.
So if you learn C first, there are other programming languages that you can learn with relative ease. In other words, C is one of the original programming languages, and from C you get C++, which is adding object-oriented programming. From C you can get Perl, you can get PHP, you can get Python. Is not one of these. Okay, Python, interestingly, is not a C-based language. I almost forgot a really big one, which is Java. It also has Objective-C. Okay, I'm just using OBJ here. So that's why C is so useful, because it is, syntactically speaking, it is the root, it is the ancestor of many other programming languages. Once you understand the C syntax, you can learn any one of these other languages more easily. Okay.
What is Python? Is Python based on?
No, Python has its own independent root. In terms of the syntax of the language, it is somewhat independent on its own.
Does Python branch off into anything else?
No, Python is just Python. But Python is, syntactically speaking, it is actually easier to learn compared to C because you don't have the open curly brace and the closed curly brace. But at the same time, it can also be more confusing because everything is implied by indentation. So if the indentation of the program is wrong, or you accidentally delete indentation, that can change the meaning of the program dramatically, but you don't realize that you have changed the meaning of the program dramatically. So that's why it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because everything is done by indentation. And when everything is done by indentation, it also makes tools a little bit harder to spot where is the beginning and where is the end of something. Whereas in C, because they always use open curly brace and closed curly brace, you can actually make tools that can analyze the structure of the program a little bit more easily. So they both have good things and bad things, advantages and disadvantages. It's just, to me, it's just different. There's no such thing as better or worse. Now, since you mentioned astrophysics, I'm kind of surprised that they did not mention the programming language called Forth. Okay, there's a weird programming language called Forth, and I mentioned this because you mentioned astrophysics. This was a programming language that was invented by a astronomer, and the reason of the invention of Forth was because the astronomer had to control the telescope, every night to go to a particular, to point to a particular star and then follow that star as the Earth rotates, right? And getting sick and tired of there's no existing programming language to do that, the astronomer invented his own programming language with the name Forth. Okay, it's a very interesting programming language because it is what we call a stack-based programming language. Everything lives on a stack. And we don't talk about a stack in this class, even though we have used it ever since we talk about subroutines. So this is an interesting programming language which also does not share a root with C.
Which is why I was confused, because I know Forth doesn't share its base with C, but they require all of us to learn C.
That's because a lot of subroutines are already written in C and C++. So that means when you need to put something together, it is not likely that you have to start from scratch. You can just use all the libraries that have been developed already when you need to write your own program.
Oh, I see. But I'll have to convert it from C, so I have to know C.
Because you'll be utilizing toolboxes, tools inside C toolboxes. There's a huge library, there's a huge collection of tools already pre-developed in the programming languages C and C++. So if you know how to program in C, that means that your program only has to bring out the tools from the toolboxes, and you don't have to rewrite everything from scratch.
Okay.
And C programs are also very efficient compared to Python. Okay, if I want to name the efficiency of these programming languages, C would be ranked number 1. It is only second to assembly programming languages. So C would be ranked 1, C++ will rank number 2, I would rank Objective-3 number 3, and then these 3 would be kind of slow. Okay, if you want to do any type of, because in astrophysics, I assume that sometimes you have to run emulations or simulations, like what happens when the star ages. Yep.
That's why we use Forth also, because you have to take your emulations and put them into the telescope so it can anticipate.
Okay.
And look for what it is you think is going to happen.
Right.
Because if the telescope doesn't know what you're looking for, it's just going to keep going tick, 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 tick.
Right.
But if you tell it, look, here's my emulation, I think this, black hole is going to eat this moon or something, it'll go tick, oh, but I haven't seen the event, tick, oh, I haven't seen the event, and it'll keep going back.
Now, the other thing that your astrophysicists have to do is to take an image and then do a lot of post-processing on